The man everyone misread at Gila Spur was not the one with his thumb hooked over a Colt. It was the one with both hands flat on the table. Arizona Territory, October 1882. The stage station sat in the heat like something the desert had forgotten to kill. One room for meals, one counter for tickets, one shelf of canned peaches with dust thick enough to write your name in. And at the center table, facing the door, sat Nate Calder, 41 years old, trail scout, drifter, a man who had learned, one bad mile at a time, that trouble usually made noise before it made blood. He wore a sun-faded black hat, a gray neckerchief, and a coat too light for winter and too heavy for that afternoon. His pistol was there, low on his right hip, but his hand stayed on the table, open, still, not because he was relaxed, because he wanted every man in that room to know exactly when they moved first. Outside, tied near the water trough, stood a smoke-done mare named Juniper, 1,300 pounds of nerve and patience with a dark stripe down her back and one torn ear from a wolf night north of Fort Bowie. She had lowered her mouth to the trough twice. She had not drunk. That was the first warning. A horse will forgive dust. A horse will forgive heat. But a horse that refuses water on an Arizona afternoon has heard something the men inside have missed. Nate saw it through the window. Juniper's head lifted, her ears fixed toward the road, and the whole room seemed to tighten around the sound of 3 riders slowing outside. The station keeper stopped wiping a tin plate. A freighter with a bandaged hand put down his fork. Nobody spoke. Then the door opened, and the men came in wearing dust like a uniform. The first was Jonah Brigg. He had shoulders made for blocking doorways, and a face that looked carved out of old boot leather. His left eye sat a little lower than the right, which gave him the permanent expression of a man measuring something for a coffin. Behind him came Toby Rill, young, narrow, all angles and appetite. The kind of boy who practiced his draw in windows and mistook reflection for reputation. The third man was Amos Keene, older than the boy, queeder than the leader, a beard going gray at the chin, wedding ring tied on a bootlace around his neck, tucked poorly beneath his shirt. Nate noticed that first. He noticed everything first. Brigg took one look around the station and smiled without warmth. "Afternoon," he said. No one answered. He didn't need them to. Men like Brigg were not looking for welcome. They were looking for the moment a room bent away from them. And it did. The freighter looked at his plate. The station keeper busied himself with a cupboard that did not need opening. A woman traveling east pulled her 2 children closer to her skirt. Brigg enjoyed every inch of that silence. Then he looked at Nate. Nate did not look down. He did not stare hard either. That was what unsettled Brigg. Nate looked at him the way a man looks at a storm line on the horizon, not scared of it, not impressed by it, just deciding how much distance he had before it broke. Brigg crossed the room slowly. Toby drifted left, near the ticket counter. Amos Keene stayed close to the door, as if some part of him still wanted the choice of leaving. Brigg stopped across from Nate's table. "You Calder?" Nate glanced at the man's boots, his hands, the dust pattern on his coat, the sweat-dark line under his hat band. Then he looked up. "That depends who's paying for the answer." Brigg's smile widened. "Silas Mercer is paying." The name reached the room before the rest of the sentence did. Silas Mercer owned freight wagons, water rights, and half the men in Pinal County who needed wages badly enough to call it loyalty. If a road had profit on it, Mercer had a hand on it. If a well could make a man rich, Mercer had a paper saying it had always belonged to him. Nate had crossed him once. He had not expected Mercer to forget. Brigg pulled a folded notice from his coat and set it on the table. Not a marshal's notice. Private paper. Heavy stock. Mercer money. $200 alive, Brigg said. 100 if we have to wrap you in canvas. Tobe gave a little laugh. Nate looked at the paper. The ink accused him of murdering Warren Mercer near Casa Grande. That part was false. Warren Mercer had drawn a pistol in a freight yard after beating a mule skinner nearly blind over a water barrel. Nate had been there. 6 men had seen Warren draw first. Only 3 had been willing to sign a statement after Silas Mercer started buying silence. That was the kind of grief rich men could afford. It did not just mourn, it hired. Nate pushed the notice back with 2 fingers. "Warren Mercer pulled first," he said. Brigg shrugged. "Dead men have trouble proving manners." Toby snorted. Heard you were quick, Calder. Nate's eyes moved to him. The boy loved that. He wanted the old gunfighter to see him. Wanted the room to see him being seen. Wanted the story before the work. You hear a lot at your age, Nate said. Tobe's jaw tightened. They say you killed 2 men outside Tucson before the second one cleared leather. People count wrong when they're frightened. Tobe leaned forward, eager as a match. Then teach me the right count. Nate took a slow breath. The right count is simple. A fast hand gets a man noticed. A quiet mind gets him buried last. The room did not move. Even Briggs' smile thinned. Tobe's fingers flexed near his holster. Not touching. Not yet. But flexing with the impatience of a boy who believed courage was a performance. Nate saw the rhythm of him. Right thumb brushing the belt once. Heel rolling outward. Shoulder lifting before the hand dropped. A terrible tell. Loud as a bell if you knew how to listen. Amos Keene had a different kind of tell. His eyes kept going to the woman with the children. Then to the door. Then back to Nate. That was not fear, exactly. That was memory. Men with something to go home to looked at exits differently. Jonah Brigg was harder. He stood loose, balanced, not eager, not stiff. His right hand hung natural at his side. His breathing did not change when Nate looked at him. That meant Brigg was either very good or dead inside. Nate had survived too long to assume there was a difference. Brigg tapped the notice once. Stand up. Nate did not. You're riding with us to Mercer's place. No. The word came out soft enough that half the room might have missed it, if the room had not been listening with its whole body. Briggs' face changed. Not much. Just enough. You think this is a negotiation? Nate looked past him, out the window. Juniper had turned her body sideways to the station now, her head angled toward the road behind the riders. Her tail was still, her neck was tight. Then she stamped once. Not panic. Signal. Nate knew that mare. He had slept in washes with her loose beside him. He had crossed Apache country with her ears telling him what his eyes could not. He knew the difference between a horse hearing wind and a horse counting men. One stamp meant the road was clear behind them. No fourth rider. No rifleman by the corral. No man waiting at the wash. 3 came in. 3 was all. Nate looked back at Brigg. I'll give you a better bargain than Mercer gave you, he said. Brigg waited. Walk out. Ride back. Tell Silas Mercer that grief does not make a lie true. Tell him Warren made his choice in Casa Grande, and today you get to make yours. Toby laughed too loud. Amos Keene did not laugh at all. Brigg leaned closer. You always talk this much before you die? Nate finally lifted his right hand from the table. Not toward the gun. Just enough to turn the folded notice so Mercer's seal faced up. No, he said. Only when there is still a chance not to. That was the last merciful sentence in the room. Brigg moved first. Not his hand, his breath. It stopped. A living man's body will lie about plenty of things. It will fake confidence. It will fake calm. It will fake a smile. But right before violence, the body usually asks for one last piece of air. Briggs did not. Nate moved into that absence. The first shot cracked so hard the woman in the corner covered both children with her arms. Briggs' pistol was still clearing leather when Nate's bullet hit him high in the chest and turned him backward into the ticket counter. Wood splintered. The private notice fluttered off the table and landed seal up in the dust. Tobe was already reaching. Of course he was. The boy had spent too much of his life imagining this exact instant and none of it imagining the sound. His heel rolled. His shoulder lifted. His hand dropped. Nate's second shot caught him before the Colt came level. Tobe hit the floor on one knee, surprise still fixed on his face, and then folded sideways like someone had cut the strings holding him up. 2 shots. Less than 3 seconds. The room had no time to scream. Amos Keene had drawn halfway. Halfway was the most dangerous place a man could be. Too far to pretend innocence. Not far enough to be committed. Nate turned toward him with smoke lifting from the barrel. He did not fire. Amos stared at him over the front sight of a pistol that had not yet risen. His mouth opened once. No sound came out. Outside, Juniper blew air through her nose, a hard, impatient sound, and the trough chain clicked in the wind. Nate kept the gun low. "Who is waiting for you?" he asked. Amos blinked. "What? At home." The pistol in Amos's hand trembled. For the first time since he'd entered, he looked like what he was. Not a shadow behind a harder man. Not a bounty rider. Just a tired fellow standing at the edge of a decision he would not survive if he made it wrong. My wife, Amos said. His voice broke on the second word. Fort Bowie Road. We got a boy coming in December. Nate looked at the gun in Amos's hand, then at the ring on the bootlace. Put it away. Amos swallowed. For one bad second, pride fought for him. Then sense won. He slid the pistol back into the holster as if it might bite him. Nate holstered his own. Go meet your boy. Amos did not move. I said go. That time he listened. He backed toward the door, eyes on Nate, stepping around Briggs' body and the paper notice in the dust. When his boot touched sunlight, he turned and ran for his horse. The station stayed silent until the sound of hoofbeats thinned westward. Only then did the woman in the corner start to cry. Not loud, just enough to let the room remember it was still alive. Nate bent, picked up Mercer's notice, and set it back on the table. The station keeper came out from behind the counter pale as flour. I should send for the deputy, he whispered. You should. Nate took 2 cartridges from his belt and replaced what he had fired. Tell him Jonah Brigg came on private paper. Tell him Mercer sent them. Tell him Amos Keene rode away breathing because he remembered he had a reason to. The station keeper stared at the bodies. What about their horses? Nate looked toward the window. Sell Briggs and the boys. Send the money where it belongs if anybody can find out where that is. You know their people? No. Then why? Nate picked up his hat from the table. Because they might have had some. He stepped out into the white heat. Juniper watched him come. She did not pull at the reins. She did not toss her head. She only waited, stern and steady, as if she had known all along that men were the only animals foolish enough to confuse noise with courage. Nate laid one hand against her neck. Still here, he said. The mare exhaled. That was all the ceremony either of them needed. He could have ridden south. He could have disappeared into country where Mercer's money would take longer to reach. There were canyons out there that could swallow a man for years if he knew where the water hid. But Nate had learned something about unfinished trouble. It did not grow tired. It grew teeth. So he mounted and turned north toward Mercer's freight yard at Quartz Gate. The ride took him through a country stripped down to its bones. Mesquite, rock, heat, dry gullies where water had once made promises and broken them. Juniper moved at the easy pace she used when distance mattered more than display. Nate let her choose it. He always did. A man could force a horse fast for a mile and pay for it across the next 20. That was true of more than horses. By dusk, the sky went red behind the ridges, and the land turned the color of old copper. Nate made a small camp in a wash where the wind had cut a hollow into the bank. He did not build a fire. Mercer's riders might be behind him by then, or they might not. Rich men could spend anger quickly, but they could not make daylight longer. He ate cold beans from the tin and gave Juniper the last clean water from his canteen before he drank. That was the arrangement. The mare carried him out of death often enough to be paid first. When the dark settled, Nate lay with his coat under his head and stared at the stars. He thought about Tobe Rill, not because he wanted to, because young dead men have a way of arriving after sunset. Tobe had been arrogant, careless, hungry for a name that would outgrow him. But he had also been young enough that somebody somewhere might still have expected him to come home with a story instead of a pine box. Nate had seen that kind before. He had been near enough to that kind, once, to hate the distance between them. Then he thought about Amos Keene, a man halfway into the draw, a man halfway out of his own grave. Nate did not know if mercy was the right word for what happened in that station. Mercy sounded clean. This had not been clean. This had been arithmetic done under smoke. One more shot would have been lawful, maybe even sensible. But sometimes sense had to make room for the fact that a man's hand could stop moving. The frontier buried plenty of fools who were quick. It sometimes spared the slower man who learned quickly enough. Nate slept badly. At first light he rode on. Quartz Gate was not much of a town. It was a mine, a freight yard, 2 rows of company houses, and a false front office painted green to make dust look like prosperity. Mercer's name sat above the office door in gold letters. Mercer Freight and Water Company. The kind of sign that told thirsty men who owned the future. Nate left Juniper in the shade of a tamarisk tree above the yard, untied. A good horse stayed because she chose to. A bad knot only flattered the man who tied it. Below, wagons creaked, teamsters cursed. A smith hammered iron against iron until sparks jumped bright in the morning shade. Nate watched for half an hour. Mercer's guard at the office porch leaned his Winchester against the wall whenever he lit a cigarette. The clerk came out every 15 minutes to pour wash water into the dust. The side door stuck at the bottom and had to be kicked open from inside. Ordinary things, useful things. Men protected doors and forgot habits. At mid-morning, Nate walked down the slope in plain sight. That was the part no one expected. A man sneaking created one kind of fear. A man arriving openly created another. The guard touched his rifle too late. Nate shook his head once. Don't earn a widow's letter for wages this poor. The guard looked at his eyes, then at the gun on Nate's hip, then at the dust on Nate's boots. Whatever he saw there made him step aside. Inside, the office smelled of ledgers, ink, cigar smoke, and water stored in barrels too valuable to waste. Silas Mercer stood behind a walnut desk reading a telegram. He was smaller than his money suggested. Narrow shoulders, silver beard trimmed with care. Hands clean enough to make a working man angry. Amos Keene stood in the corner, alive, ashamed. Mercer looked up. For 1 second, the telegram lowered, but his face did not change. Then he saw Amos's expression, and the meaning arrived. Nate Calder, Mercer said. Nate removed his hat. Mr. Mercer. Amos would not meet his eyes. Mercer laid the telegram flat on the desk. I sent 3 men. You did. Where are Brigg and Rill? Where bad orders left them? Mercer's mouth tightened. His right hand moved toward the desk drawer. Nate's voice stopped it. The little Remington in that drawer has 2 rounds. One of them misfires. Your clerk told a teamster that last week when he was trying to sound important. Mercer's hand went still. Nate looked at the drawer. Leave it closed. Mercer slowly lifted his hand away. Amos Keene let out a breath he had been holding. You came here to threaten me in my own office, Mercer said. No. I came here so you would not need to guess. Guess what? How this ends if you keep buying men. The office seemed to shrink around them. Outside, the hammering stopped. Nate stepped closer and placed Mercer's private notice on the desk. Dusty, creased. The seal cracked from the station floor. Then he placed another paper beside it. A sworn statement from Casa Grande. 3 names, 3 signatures. Enough truth to matter. Not enough to comfort a man who did not want truth. Warren drew first, Nate said. He did it after beating a teamster over a barrel of water he had no right to claim. I told him to put the pistol down. He chose not to. Mercer's eyes did not leave the statement. He was my son. Yes. You expect that to become smaller because of a piece of paper? No. Nate's voice lowered. I expect you to understand that making other men die for it will not make him less dead. That line hit harder than a slap would have. Mercer looked up. There was grief in him. Real grief. Nate could see it. But grief was not the only thing there. Pride stood beside it. Ownership. The insult of being refused by a world he was used to purchasing. You killed my boy, Mercer said. Your boy reached for a gun. He was 23. So was Tobe Rill. Mercer flinched. Only a little. Enough. Nate pointed at Amos without looking at him. And this man would have left a wife and an unborn child because you mistook vengeance for duty. Amos shut his eyes. Mercer looked at him then, for the first time maybe, not as a tool that had failed. As a man who had almost been spent. You want money? Mercer asked. Nate almost smiled. No. Then what? I want you to count. Mercer said nothing. Warren, Brigg, Rill, almost Keene. That is the price already paid for one lie you keep trying to make official. Nate put his hat back on. You can send more. Mercer's jaw worked. I have the means. I know. And you think you can kill every man I hire? Nate looked at him for a long moment. No. The honesty unsettled the room. Nate let it sit there. I think some will turn around before the draw. Some will be worse than Brigg. One might be better than me. That is how roads work. Sooner or later, every man meets the mile he cannot finish. He leaned slightly over the desk. But here is the part you need to understand. From this morning forward, every rider you hire will know why the last 3 did not come back. They will know you sent them over a son who drew first. They will ask for more money. They will drink more before leaving. They will sleep worse. And if they find me, I will already know who paid them. Mercer looked older than he had when Nate walked in. Nate turned toward the door. Mr. Calder. He stopped. Mercer's voice had lost some of its iron. If I let it end, does that make me a coward? Nate looked back. No. Mercer waited. Nate said, it makes you late, but not too late. Then he walked out. The guard on the porch did not reach for the rifle. No one did. Juniper was still waiting in the tamarisk shade, half asleep, one hind leg cocked, as if human drama was a poor use of a morning. Nate mounted without hurry. Behind him, in the green office, Silas Mercer had papers on his desk and a drawer he had not opened. That was all Nate could give him. A choice. Not forgiveness, not peace. Just one open door and the burden of walking through it. He rode south by the old wagon road. By noon, Quartz Gate had folded behind the ridges. By afternoon, the land widened again, and the wind came clean over the flats. Nate let the reins rest loose. His right hand ached. Not from the shooting, from not shooting. That was the part men did not sing about. No ballad ever made much out of a finger that did not tighten, or a word that stopped a gun from clearing leather, or the strange heaviness that follows a life left standing. But Nate knew the weight of it. He carried Brig and Toby because he had to. He carried Amos Keene because he had chosen to. And he carried Mercer because leaving a man alive with his own decision could be its own kind of punishment. Near sunset, he stopped on a ridge and looked back. No riders, no dust column. Only the long, empty road and a hawk circling where the heat lifted off the stone. Juniper's ears moved once, then settled. Nate touched the mare's neck. Looks like he learned to count. Maybe Mercer had, maybe he had not. Stories from that country rarely closed as neatly as men wanted them to. A grudge could sleep for a season and wake meaner. Money could grow a new set of hands by winter. Amos Keene might hold his son and never wear a gun again, or he might one day forget the mercy that saved him. There was no way to know. That was the honest shape of it. But on that evening, under a sky too wide to care who was right, no one was following Nate Calder. For once, the gun was in the holster because the day had run out of reasons to draw it. And maybe that is what separates the survivor from the legend men invent later. Not speed, not nerve, not the number of bodies behind him. The frontier was full of quick hands. It buried quick hands by the acre. Nate Calder survived because he understood the one lesson most violent men learn too late. A gun can end a moment. Only judgment can end a debt. And when the gun had done enough, he knew how to stop.